I thought today we could talk about taking choices and recognizing that choices are always part of your own responsibility. And a case in point, I've just come off a 2-hour session with a particular client, and you know, whenever we go through difficult times in life, for whatever reason they may be, and this particular client is going through a very, very horribly sticky, nasty divorce, toxic, manipulative, you call it what you want. And, you know, and I'm sure he's contributed his own bits to it. I'm not sort of saying my client, poor thing, is innocent and the other person is the bad one. All I'm saying is that as you go through something very, very difficult, no matter what you have contributed to it yourself, one of the choices you have is that very famous, you know, saying that we mention so many times from Viktor Frankl, which is, of course, the last of a man's freedoms is the ability to choose his own attitude at any situation he's faced with. So I was saying to this client, right now you are in the midst of this terrible, terrible thing, and everything you're telling me makes it sound like you are the victim of the situation, of the lawyers, of the system, of the courts, of your former partner, and you know, everything that has happened over the course of time. And I say, while all of that is true, you also have a choice in how you think about it and in how you look at it. And one of the ways of looking at it is, this is my way forward. And if I have to go through this, you know, gauntlet, you remember what a gauntlet is? The Indians used to make the white pioneers, when they would capture them, run the gauntlet. So there'd be 2 lines of Indians, and then I think they would strip the white man down, and they would make him run through the 2 lines of Indians who would be, you know, kicking him, hitting him with who knows what, and attacking him in all manner of ways. And if he got through to the other end, he had in some fashion gained their respect, and they might let him live. So when we go through a really bad situation and we go through the gauntlet of all the things that are happening to us in that very bad situation, and there can be so many, the first thing I always say, make the decision, choose to look for something you can learn from this. And what that something is, I can't be the one to tell you what that is, but you can figure something out if you so desire. It's always worked for me, you know, and I've been through my own number of difficult things. So once you can figure out something that you can learn from it, your point of view, your focus has changed completely. You're no longer looking at, oh, poor me, you know, look at all this bad stuff that is happening to me or what is being done to me. You're looking at it from the point of view of, how can I grow from this? How can I move forward in my life into becoming more of what I am? And of course, if you have learned to do something that like that, you've learned one of the most important things in life. And you know, I can't help but say, I think everybody should read that book, that Viktor Frankl book, to understand, because the part that has to do with this is relatively short. The book has many other things in it, but the part that is the Auschwitz part, where he comes to these conclusions, is a relatively short manuscript. And it helps you so much understand that in any situation in life, no matter how difficult, you can make this decision. So you become responsible for your choices. Sometimes being responsible for the choices you make in your thinking mind, not only the choices in what you do, but in how you think about things, means that you have to think out of the box, not in the way that perhaps most people would think about whatever it is that's going on. You know, I've told you sometimes the story of a friend of mine who was dying of cancer, and she very much wanted to remain alive, but she knew she was not going to remain alive. So her thinking out of the box was to think of, obviously based in part on her Buddhist background, was to think about this new adventure she was going on. She would have liked to have stayed, but under the circumstances, she couldn't stay because she was going to die. So she put it as a wonderful new adventure upon which she was embarking, and chose to think about her impending death in this way. And as I've told you, she and I discussed it under those, you know, auspices. Those were the words we used, the adventure she was going out on, and how excited she was about it. Now, also you have to think about how much is your ego playing a role in the choices that you make, in the choices you make about thinking. Let's say I have a client who speaks neither extremely good English, nor do I speak extremely good whatever that client speaks. Let's say it's an Italian, and what with our you know, common languages, we manage to make sense out of each other, but we both are aware of the fact that there are a lot of finer points that neither he is getting from me, nor am I getting from him. We can use a word from over here and a word from over that language and so on, and try and make each other understand. But when it comes to the finer points, we're not making a good deal out of it. For some reason or another, this client wishes to remain with me, as opposed to finding somebody who speaks fluent Italian. But he now brings in an Italian therapist to help us with the process. He still wants to stick with me, but he wants the Italian therapist to, you know, help iron out. And the Italian therapist speaks extremely good English, or some language that I speak. So the language barrier is lessened. If I am led by my ego, my choice is now going to be to get up on my high horse. Oh, you don't think I'm good enough for you, or oh, you don't trust my opinion, and so you have to bring somebody else in. You see where I'm going with this? It's obviously very childish, but we become very childish when we let the ego make decisions for us. And the ego is never the part of us that we've discussed so many times on these meetings that we've had together. And by the way, today's meeting number 31, in case you were counting. We want to remain in our world of being in control, in our world of knowing I am important or I am valuable, but in this way that is counted like that by the outside world, as opposed to something inside of me. So my ego is going to be more important to me than the part of me that would recognize bringing in this Italian therapist is going to be for the good of my client. It's not because my client doesn't trust me, but because my client needs that extra bit of further understanding. I realize it's a kind of a dumb example, but anyway, bear with me. So my choices, if they are led by my ego, are not always going to be the best choices to make. How about this? My teenage child wishes to become a musician and wishes to go to Juilliard, a very famous music school. And I want a kid that moves in the direction of, Harvard or Yale. So since I'm the one who's paying the bills, I eventually convince my child that they should apply to Harvard or Yale, which obviously with my background or my connections and my money is going to be a done deal. And my child will now become a proud alumnus of Harvard or Yale. But my choice was made based on ego. And while that again is a kind of ridiculous example, it shows you very clearly where ego looms much more heavily or weighs much more heavily in the making of choices than that which lies inside of you. And when you make your choices, you kind of have to really be aware of what you're doing. You also have to be aware of your intentions. So I was telling Ronan a little example about a lady at security in Heathrow a moment ago, and what I said to her was led by ego. That is very clear. I got a little kick out of making her feel a little silly or a little whatever. And as I was saying it, I was very aware of the fact, aha, here's another one you have to work on. I mean, it wasn't a big one, but just because it wasn't a big one doesn't mean I shouldn't be aware of it, and doesn't mean I shouldn't be working on it in order to not make similar choices in future. To make another human being feel just a little less by virtue of the words I said that were not insulting, that were not horrible words, but they were enough, and the intention behind them was to make her realize that there had been something silly about what had happened that could have been avoided, just like some of the other agents were doing some very different things than what she was doing. And that, of course, is on me. That's not on her. What she did is on her. What I say and what I do is on me. And these are choices. And that was a choice that was led by the ego, very clearly. So, but when we make choices, it's not just about how we behave with other people. It's also about what do we choose to eat? What do we choose to read? What subjects do we choose to talk about? What arguments do we choose to engage in? Or I think we even spoke about this briefly one day here on one of the meetings when I was still in Miami. If you are engaged in a Facebook exchange about, let's call it a political subject, where everybody is, being polite and voicing their opinions, and it's quite interesting. Sometimes these things can happen. And suddenly, because one of you has an opinion that doesn't go with the opinion of another, this other becomes very inflamed and rude. Now you have a choice. And you can choose to put this person down, even if you use only very, very polite language, or you can choose to let it go. And, you obviously must do what you think is right. In my case, I choose to let things like that go. Why? Because of the type of medium it is, public forum, Facebook, etc. Because I don't really care enough to, try and convince that person of something that they're already not convinced of anyway. I choose not to waste my time any further, etc., etc. But these are choices, and I say my choice is not necessarily the right choice. I'm just saying what my choice would be. And so, of course, in all of these instances, we're making choices all day long. Do I choose to become impatient? when I'm standing in line, not now in COVID-19, we don't have lines to stand in, or almost not. But do I choose to become impatient if I'm standing in line at the bank or at the grocery store and somebody is in ahead of me and either the cashier is taking too long or the person is taking too long or whatever may be happening? It's a choice to become impatient. It's a choice to tell yourself, well, I have this magnificent little device here with me. I can read the news, or I can, engage my interest in some fashion as I wait for this little delay to be over. You have choices about what you talk about at the dinner table with your family. Are you engaging with them, or are you simply having a conversation about something that nobody really wants to talk about? For example, if you say to your kids, so how was school today? You can bet your bottom dollar you're going to get a grunt or a, oh, okay. In reply, you will rarely get a reply where you have a proper conversation. Whereas if you perhaps say something about a point of interest that has happened in your own day, in other words, you share something about yourself, open up, become vulnerable in some fashion, it could be that you draw them in. Or if you and your partner, your husband or wife, are accomplices in this particular part of the conversation, where you're not even necessarily paying attention to the kids, you're just telling each other interesting stuff that happened during your own days, obviously at the level of whatever ages your kids are at, so that they can understand what you're talking about. And frequently, you'll draw them in where you might not if you ask them specific questions. So, what do you choose to talk about at the dinner table, right? Because you want to make choices that lead to a happier home, a home filled with greater joy, a home filled with more laughter, et cetera, et cetera. How do you choose to spend your money? Why is that an important question? Let's say you've got enough extra money apart from what your life costs you to spend it on, something important. Well, you can choose to spend it on maybe a second home, or a bunch of really fantastic cars, or a boat, or you can choose to spend it on a child's education, but let's assume you already have the education covered. Well, maybe you can choose to spend it on a number of interesting trips and vacations for the entire family, which is a non-tangible thing, because it will not be something you can, park in your garage or go and spend nights in, but it is something that will have put your family closer together. So, of course, the constant making of choices can lead you to the understanding of what I said at the beginning, referring to this client of mine. Always look for the growth opportunity in the challenge that you're facing. Imagine you've been training all your life to become an Olympic skiing champion, and now you're very, very close to an important part of the trials, and you break your leg. I mean, it is really rotten luck. But now what do you do with what you think, in what you choose to think about this thing that has happened? Perhaps it has happened in such a way that you will have no time to recuperate and still be able to participate in the trials. So you know that at least for a year, you're out of the game. And depending on other circumstances, maybe more than a year. So practicing how you choose to think about any single thing in your life is something we should all be aware of. How am I thinking? How am I thinking about the fact, for example, that I am alone, right? Or that I am married, or that I have children, or that I don't have children. How do people choose to think about these very important things in their lives? In my case, the fact that I am alone after many years of having been in important relationships, well, important for me, relationships. I was going to say that I have more space in my closets. But seriously, the way I choose to think about it is I would like to have companionship, but I am very aware of the fact that many of the things I've done and continue to do and find great pleasure in would not have been possible if I had had continual companionship in my life over the course of it. So the way I choose to think about it is that this has given me great freedom, the being alone, to move forward in my chosen, subjects, my chosen arenas. The fact that I have children gives me great joy. It's also brought me great pain, but it is something that has enriched my life, and I would assume most parents think about that in similar ways, although I know many do who actually don't, unfortunately. So coming back now to the idea of how you think when you are having challenges, and going a little bit into the Carol and Miss idea about the wounds in your life. Let's say my challenges were when I was, pretty young. I went through a very hard childhood. I had very toxic, dysfunctional, abusive parents. Let's say this were my case. And here I am at the age I now have, and I continue to think about this in ways that lower my energy. I can make choices here. I can make a very big choice about how I think about this. I can choose to think, okay, did this make me any stronger? If it didn't make me any stronger, what can I do now in order to make me stronger, make myself stronger? Is this something I can work on? Can I choose to think about this differently? And you can apply this kind of thinking to absolutely anything that has happened to you in your life, way back then, now, yesterday. If you understand that it is your choice to do so. I also want to mention something that I bring up a lot, but I think it's such a good illustration of the point. So I was taking a hike one day with a bunch of people up here on the coast. And we went up into one of the mountains, but first we parked the cars as far up as we could drive, and we parked the cars adjacent to a garbage dump. It wasn't a horrendous garbage dump, but it was a garbage dump, and there were many bins and overflowing, garbage and bags and refuse and what have you. And if you just turned around a little bit from that dump and looked over here, you saw the entire coastline. So one of the ladies that was with us said to me, "Oh, have you seen this? These Spanish, look at what they do." As if the Spanish had a copyright on dumping. But anyway, that was her mindset. And, and proceeded to point out the garbage to me. And I said, "Yeah, I see it. But did you look over there? Did you see the coastline? Oh, but look at this." So she had made a choice. She had focused on the garbage. And I focused on the beautiful coastline. Both were there. I wasn't denying the garbage by not looking at it. I suppose we could say she wasn't denying the coastline by not looking at it, but she had made a choice to focus at the ugly, the negative, that which gave her no pleasure, and I made the opposite choice. And in anything at all in life, you can do the same. Um, people will often say to me, "Oh, you take such lovely photographs," or "Oh, you're so lucky to live in such a beautiful area of the world." Well, I promise you, I will find beautiful photographs no matter where I am. I might have to look a little harder, or I might have to zoom in to just get that one beautiful bit and not have what's around that beautiful bit in order that my photo be beautiful, but I'll find it. And I will actively hunt for it. And those are choices. Um, but do you see what I'm saying? Or I'll hear the bird song, even though what I'm looking at is not pretty. I remember being in the parking lot of a large supermarket in Miami in these past weeks that I've been there. And, the parking lot was a parking lot, nothing special about it, full of cars. And above the parking lot, there were many, many electrical wires, because I guess they all connected to the many different businesses that were in that area. And all of a sudden, I see a murmuration of, I don't know if they were just swallows or house martins or whatever the birds were. I don't recognize birds too much. They were little birds. But there was this huge murmuration. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that came in a formation, landed on all these wires, electrical wires, and sat there for a bit. It reminded me of that song by Leonard Cohen, "Bird on a Wire." So my choice, as opposed to looking at the busy car parking lot or just seeing nasty electrical wires, my choice was to see the beautiful symmetry of these birds that had swooped in, that were now sitting thickly on these wires, waiting in anticipation, because I knew they were going to fly out again. And so they did. And it was very beautiful. And it happened to be that the sun was setting, so I could see all of this against the light of the setting sun. And I got a big thrill. So my choice in a situation like that is always to look for beauty. But you can also choose to look for beauty in a human being. And I don't mean a human being that is not, physically pleasing to look at. I mean to look for the beauty inside that soul, inside that person. And we so often don't do that. We don't like something about them, not to mention if we don't pay attention, to any except the most gorgeous on Instagram, the influencers with the big fat lips and, sitting and standing in certain ways and taking pictures of themselves. I don't mean just that. I mean that we don't often wait a moment and try and choose to see that which is beautiful about that particular person. And of course, there's something beautiful about all of us. We just have to be willing to see it. Like I was looking for the coastline and this lady was looking for the garbage, and so on. So having a mindset of choosing to look for beauty, of choosing to look for, I'm going to say, the good, of choosing to look for that which I can learn from this very difficult moment through which I am walking, of choosing to be patient, improve my skills at being patient, improve my skills at being kind, choosing to improve my skills at being compassionate. These are all choices we make. And of course, the more we make the choice where we look for the beauty or the improvement or any of these sort of examples I've been using, analogies, the more we add to the energy with which we co-create another world. And I cannot repeat it often enough. This can only happen if you do it and I do it and he does it and she does it and all the rest of us do it. And of course, the more you do it and I do it and all the rest of us do it, the more those whose lives touch upon yours or that you have any kind of contact with, um, the more they see what you are doing, the more there is an opportunity for the effect to escalate, for the effect to grow exponentially. And that's basically what we're after, some kind of a critical mass. So that is what I had for today. I know we probably have something like 6 or 7 minutes left. Yes. So if anybody wants to unmute themselves or say something, now's your chance. If I can get my screen back here, which doesn't seem to be happening. There we go. So any thoughts on choices? Because, you know, it's literally every single day, all day long, that we make choices. I also think, go ahead.
You know, about making choices. For example, you used to meet people, have people around you that always have bad news, always. And in the morning, and they send you a what's up, and I give that to you for your breakfast. Have a nice breakfast after this bad news. In Venezuela, there's a lot of bad news, and people don't see that what you're saying. They need to talk badly about the country. And for the Venezuelans that live in Miami, okay, they talk horrible things about what's happening in Venezuela, that they're not here. And when there is something wrong in the United States, they don't say anything.
Also choices, yes. But you know, Maria, one of the things I noticed when I was in Miami, a lot of people from here, from Spain, said to me things like, oh, it's really bad over there, isn't it? Oh, how terrible. So many people dying. Are you okay? Are you safe? Now that I'm back here, people from over there say, oh, be careful in Spain. So many people dying. Are you sure you're safe? No, see what you want to see.
Yeah, the thing, I know that. But the thing is, it's how to get away from those people. You see, because it's a thing, it's every single day the same story. So you get, okay, this one is toxic, this one, and then maybe I am toxic too, you know? That's something for me that's very complicated, because people, I don't want to talk to them anymore because they always have a bad news.
Yeah. Well, you know, I try to steer away from people who have bad news, and I've noticed that more and more the people that kind of are in my life, at least in my personal life, are people who tend to either talk about really interesting things or very positive people. So those are kind of two criteria, because to talk about gossip or to talk about negative stuff, not interested.
Okay, that's it.
And the rest of them, you get rid of them. I mean, you don't get rid of them in the sense you don't speak to them anymore, but you kind of phase them out of your life because you got to make room. You know, it's like when you need more room in your closet. You get rid of some of the old stuff, so the new stuff can fit in.
Because you know, I think we have an enemy. We need an enemy, okay? And it's better to have an enemy outside. Oh no. And so you don't see your enemy inside. For example, here, the government, everything happens here. It's Trump's fault.
Of course. Maduro and Trump.
Yeah, it's always him. It's always Trump. Whatever happens. So it's. I mean, for me, it's easier to see my enemy inside me like you said, the choices, than to see it outside and blame who is outside. You
Yeah.
see?
Yeah, but the enemy, as you call it, probably Jung would have said projections. So we
Yeah.
can
Mhm.
project. So the Americans who were worried about me coming back to Spain, or the Spanish who were worried about me being in America, were projecting the danger of the COVID-19 on the different countries. And
That's
this
it.
projection, we do it politically, we do it, socially, and we do it in so many different ways. Um, I think whenever I am disliking something, inside or out, especially if it's out there, I have to think about it as a red flag. And if it's
Yeah.
something I'm disliking in myself, I at least need to examine it carefully. What's going on here? What's this about? Maybe I ask a trusted friend, how do you see this part of me, et cetera, et cetera. Because there's, healthily, you shouldn't be disliking anything about yourself. You can improve something. I know I have ego, when I was saying the business about the thing I said to the lady in security. So my ego. Okay, I know I have this ego, and I know this is still something I'm working on. Probably I continue to work on it until the day I die. But at least I know about it. So I don't dislike it. I kind of look at it and I say, okay, cha-cha, slow down.